Hey there, folks. Brian King here. As you know, I've been talking a lot about stigma, stigmatization, and all subjects related to that. One thing that's important to do that I don't know that I have defined yet is, what do we mean when we talk about stigma? Well, I went and I surveyed Professor Google, and what Google came back with is that stigma is basically any opinion of disgrace that is placed upon a person, their circumstances, a characteristic. If you think that, for instance, I've got tattoos, okay? When I got my first tattoo, people said to me, well, I didn't know you were that kind of person. I said, well, what does that mean exactly? They said, well, the kind of person that, does parties and does drugs and all that. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. All I got was some ink in my skin. How did you make that quantum leap to think that I was this reckless human being? Well, because in their mind, tattoos were disgraceful. They were stigmatized. They had this entire story around the kind of person, or that your character was somehow reflected in the fact that you decided to get a tattoo. Ridiculous, isn't it? Unless, of course, you have that stereotype and that stigmatization. Kids that are acting out in public because they have autism or ADHD or anything like that. And how disgraceful. My child would never act like that in public. My child is perfect. You must be a bad parent. Your child just needs a good spanking. And this wonderful story you pile on them because that behavior is disgraceful. You don't know the context. When I first started using cane, walker, or wheelchair, I admit, and looking back, it was because of my own subjectivity, but I felt a degree of embarrassment, like people were staring at me, like people were judging me. I did a video yesterday on staring and how to deal with that. But I had my own stigma. I had my own judgment because I was my own point of reference. I loved hiking, I liked climbing hills, and I looked at people in wheelchairs and thought, well, they must be missing out. Now I know better. That bubble of ignorance has been popped. Still a little work to do, of course, but it was ignorance that caused me to stigmatize people in a situation that I simply did not understand. And I arrogantly believed I did. I believe that I knew that person's experience when I'd never been in their shoes / wheelchair, etc. But the biggest villain, I think, when it comes to stigmatization isn't how people look upon us. It's the stigma we place upon ourselves. One thing I was told when I was a kid is, Brian, you're your own worst enemy, which was absolutely correct. I could beat myself up between my ears better than anyone. I could call myself a loser, stupid, any name you could think of, quicker than anybody else ever would. Now, yeah, that opinion unfortunately was reinforced by some bullies and some ignorant teachers, but I did a lot of that work for them. All they needed to do was plant the seed, and I kept the conversation going. So even if the world were to change tomorrow, chances are, if you have that internal dialogue going on where you think, man, I'm wrong for being different. If you happen to be of the LGBT community, that you think, I'm ashamed for being gay, I'm ashamed for being lesbian, it's something disgraceful, something wrong about that. Yeah, there are a lot of people in this society that believe that, but if you believe that too, that's you imposing stigma upon yourself. When I was embarrassed because I had to use a wheelchair and couldn't walk as much anymore, I was stigmatizing myself. So moving beyond stigma, learning to have a stigma-free life isn't about going out there and combating the gremlins of discrimination or ignorance in other people. That's important too. But you first got to conquer that demon in yourself. You have got to learn to find pride. And by pride, I don't mean arrogance. The pride that I'm better than you. By pride, I mean the absence of shame, the presence of confidence and comfort within your own skin, your own condition, whatever it is. And that's where the most important work begins. And that's why I really focus on it so much. As you know, I did a lot of work with ADHD and autism for years now, well over a decade. But when I realized that those were just single expressions of a bigger problem. The bigger problem is, how do we treat ourselves? How do we accept our difference? How do we learn to be comfortable in our own skin? And I was really limiting my capacity to help people by so narrowly focusing on ADHD and Asperger's and autism, because they're not the only groups that stigmatize themselves. They're not the only groups that are experiencing the stigma from an ignorant society. People with anxiety, depression, people with gender differences or differences of sexual orientation, they all experience the internal and external stigma. So wouldn't I be better served if I helped as many people as I could, regardless of where the stigma was coming from? I mean, I've grown up with ADHD and Asperger's. I have depression and anxiety. I live with physical challenges, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, multiple sclerosis. I have it coming from all sides. And my primary work has been, how do I relieve the pressure I put on myself? How do I stop beating myself up and accept myself fully as a vulnerable human being, just like everybody else in the world? And how do I support them, meaning you or anybody else, in discovering that about yourself? Well, I do it by addressing the stigma that we create between our own minds, the stigma that we allow to infect our hearts, inflict upon others, and the stigma that we allow to impact us. So that's what I'm working on. That's what I'm here to help you work on. And let me support you in any way that I can, because that's my purpose. So I hope you have a beautiful day. I hope you have as stigma-free a day as possible. And learn to love yourself. Cut yourself some slack, because you're not alone. We're all in this together. If there's somebody you know that can benefit from this message, please share it with them so they know they're not alone either. Until we talk again, this has been Brian. Take care.